on climate change, and your number one answer was a carbon tax. And I studied.
That's not my complete answer, but that is part of my solution.
Okay. My experience with the EPA has been doing taxes on pollution forever, and big corporations always find it easier to pay the fines than they do to actually make the changes. So that's my biggest concern about that.
Well,
I'm curious about that and what other things you have.
So the way a carbon tax would work, it'll raise the price of fossil fuel energy. So it's not really in many ways a tax on the companies, it's a tax on the users of energy.
Right, but that's going to tax, the rich people find ways to get around that, and it ends up being a huge burden on the poor people.
Right, but I introduced the only bipartisan carbon tax bill in Congress. It puts a price on carbon, and it takes all the money, and it gives it back to the American people in a dividend. And we structure the dividend to be progressive. So for working class people, they get back more in the dividend than they pay in. And it's bipartisan, right? I believe I can get it done in my first year as president by putting together a coalition of all the Democrats and the Republicans in coastal states, because they actually care about it. And Columbia University was modeled this bill it'll lower greenhouse gas emissions by 92% by 2050. But that's only part of my solution.
How does that keep the big corporations from using so much energy?
Because they pay, what it does is it basically raises the price of fossil fuels and makes renewables more competitive. Big corporations are going to use the cheapest energy they can get their hands on.
Unless it's expensive to switch over.
Well, but every 20 years, all the energy infrastructure in this country changes, right? Because, things get old and you have to replace it. So what a carbon tax does is it raises the price of fossil fuels, makes them less price competitive to renewables, and encourages people to use renewables and build more renewables capabilities. It will work.
What are your other solutions?
That's part one. That doesn't solve the problem, that slows it down. Part two is to increase the Department of Energy research budget by 5-fold. Right now we spend $6 billion on clean energy research. I'm calling for $30 billion. Right? So a moonshot type approach to coming up with new technologies in storage and transmission. Unless we have those, we're never going to really get to net zero by 2050, which we have to do. And the third thing I want to do, and this is in many ways the most exciting and the most unique, I want to create a market for what's called negative emissions technologies. These are machines that take carbon out of the atmosphere. They exist right now. I mean, the science has been proven. The problem is they're really expensive and they're not to scale. But that used to be the problem of wind and solar too. But we created renewable incentives that encouraged people to invest in wind and solar, and it lowered the price. I want to do the same thing. I want to take the $5 billion a year that we spend on tax credits to the fossil fuel industry. I want to take that away from them, and I want to use it to create a market for the government to buy carbon from technologies that suck it out of the atmosphere and put it in the earth. I believe we can create a market, we can lower the price, and these machines over time could take 20% of the carbon out of our atmosphere. And the reason it's so exciting and important to me is climate change is a global issue. China and India are opening a coal power plant 1 per week. We have to come up with the technologies that actually get the carbon out of the atmosphere, because we can't get off carbon fast enough in this world.
Have you looked into regenerative agriculture?
Yes, that works too, but you need more than that, right? 80% of the energy in the world comes from fossil fuels. We have to get the carbon out of them, right? We're going to get off fossil fuels ultimately, but it's not going to happen fast enough. So what we got to do is we got to pull the carbon out of fossil fuels and out of our atmosphere, because we have to get to net zero by 2050.
I agree with you. If you look at the French agriculture minister previous, he had a plan that would do regenerative agriculture and completely reverse climate change just with that.
Well, I'm working with the head of the UN Commission on negative emissions technology, a guy named Steve Bacala, who's a professor at Princeton. And the problem we have is 80% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels. That's largely been stable for a long time. we're not getting off fossil fuels fast enough. Right? We're not. We're just not. And the world's growing, and more of it's becoming developed, and it has more energy needs. So we have to do all the things to get off fossil fuels and get on renewables, that's why my carbon tax and all that. But we have to do more. We actually have to invent the machines that'll pull the carbon out of the atmosphere. That's the only way to save us. And the technologies exist, but they need a huge amount of investment, and we need to create a market for it. That's why my solution, I think, is very unique, and I think it's by far the best one.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.